Hello and welcome to the Red Room and the first session in our quest to create music like a pro. So firstly, when it comes to creating music, we are all individuals with our own tastes and styles. So whilst I'll be coming at this from a rock perspective, the same principles should apply to any music style. Now, I don't know what level of musician you are, so I'm going to walk through my processes as if you were an absolute novice. I'll be discussing topics that some of you will be fully aware of, but bear with me, I promise we'll get to the juicy stuff soon. So with that in mind, let's take a look at one of the most vital elements in the process, and that is your workspace and your equipment. In order for you to create anything, you need space to think and focus, and that's not going to happen in a room full of distractions. So you first need to choose a space that is going to allow you to concentrate, and for most novices this is a bedroom. Some of us might have the luxury of spare rooms, or in this instance a garage, but if you are in a small apartment in Hong Kong, for example, space will be at a premium. So for those of you with limitations, you're going to need only enough space for a laptop and a couple of small devices. In order for you to get your music into your computer, you're going to need a digital audio interface. And what this does is it converts the electric signal that normally gets fed into your amplifier from your guitar or the microphone into a digital format. There are a huge range of products out there, but a good trusty entry-level piece of kit is the Scarlett 4i4 by Focusrite. FYI, I am not sponsored by Focusrite, they are just, in my opinion, a great reliable option. I've used their products trouble-free for years, but do shop around as you may find other suppliers out there equally as good. The latest model will set you back about £274, which is about $340 US, but you can get the third generation model for about £144, and that's about $175 US. I've got an older 2i4 model here, which gives you two inputs on the front for either an XLR or guitar cable. They both go into the same slot, and it has a headphone socket with volume control. It has the 48 volt phantom power button that you will need for certain kinds of microphones. On the back it has a USB port. This one has the older USB 2B format, but in the latest versions it comes with the now thankfully standard USB-C slot. It also has on the back your MIDI in and MIDI out, and that is essential if you're going to be using a MIDI keyboard such as this piano. Basically you'll need two MIDI cables with that, a MIDI out from the piano that goes into the MIDI in port in the back, and then to send back to the piano if you need that, you want to go have a cable that goes from the MIDI out back to the MIDI in port on the piano. If you're wondering what MIDI is, we will be discussing it later on in this program. This device and all the modern devices come with all the cables that you'll need, but please check to make sure if you need a USB adapter to fit into your laptop or computer. There are more professional variations of the Scarlett interface with up to 18 inputs. I have the 18i20, which is a rack-mounted device, which basically affords me the luxury of having more mic slots if I wanted to, say, mic up a drum kit, for example. But for entry level, the 4i4 will do you just fine. The type of microphone you will need will come down purely to budget. As with most things technical, the less you pay, the worse the quality. So I would suggest that your minimum entry-level mic ought to be a Shure SM58, or for example an equivalent AKG D5, which will set you back roughly about £100, which is USD 120 for the SM58. The AKG is slightly cheaper, but the quality is just as good. These are dynamic cardioid microphones that are superb for live performances, as they pick up everything in front of the microphone, i.e. the singer's mouth, but it's not going to pick up anything behind the microphone, such as vocal monitors and, well, the crowd. Now, these do an excellent job, but they don't take in the full subtleties of your voice, all of those beautiful little breathy inhales and those subtle tones. Those kind of things you're going to need a studio microphone for. Once we get into the realm of studio condenser microphones, the price starts to go up because these are more sophisticated pieces of equipment. Like I say, they will pick up a lot more of the natural features of your voice and make your vocals sound so much better than a simple dynamic microphone will. The prices for these ones, we're going to start around the $250. You can get cheaper, but the quality is going to be about the equivalent of a dynamic microphone. So I have an older AKG C2000B, which I believe is discontinued now, but there'll be a similar kind of model. And I got that for around £250, which was about $300. And I used that for vocal takes up until the point where I made the decision to upgrade to a more professional studio microphone. The AKG is still fantastic. I use it for acoustic guitars because it just picks up beautiful warm tones of my acoustic guitars and does an excellent job. So it's not throwaway by any stretch of the imagination. You can always reuse your microphones later on for different purposes. Now again, depending on budget, the sky is the absolute limit with studio microphones, the condenser microphones. You can spend an absolute fortune on them. I upgraded recently to a Neumann TLM107, which retails about £1,000, which is about 1200 USD, and the quality is fantastic. Both my original AKG and the Neumann come with their own cradles. Now this cradle helps stop any reverberations coming up the microphone stand and into the microphone, so stuff like footsteps and you stomping your foot, it's not going to come up the microphone stand into the microphone and subsequently into your recording. Most studio condenser microphones also have a little switch option on it that allows you to change the polar pattern that the microphone picks up. Now what's that? Polar patterns are basically invisible electromagnetic fields around the microphone in a sort of 3D pattern, and depending on the shape of it, it picks up different tones in your voice. Now, everyone's voice is different, and this is influenced by things like the shape of your mouth, your skull, the cavity, and the way the sound resonates within it, the muscles in your throat. So one pattern definitely does not fit all. It takes a little bit of time and effort to find out which one works best for you. Another piece of equipment you will need is a pop shield. This is basically a piece of nylon stretched over a sort of metal circle or a plastic circle, and that stops the air being blown onto your microphone as you sing, which would otherwise result in a popping sound, like a in your recording. These are inexpensive, but an absolute must-have. Okay, so your microphone must always be on a stand. Do not hold it to sing, as your microphone will pick up any movement with your hands. The core of the mic should be level with your nose. So on a condenser microphone, it's the little thing you can see inside through the mesh on the outside of the microphone. In a dynamic microphone, it's basically just the rounded end of the microphone. The distance away should be your thumb and your fist resting against your chin, and the microphone should sit there. So take your hand away, that's the distance you should be looking at. Another worthwhile piece of kit, if you have the room, is an isolation shield. This helps to deaden the sound being picked up by the microphone, eliminating echoes that might be bouncing off the wall behind you. The trick here is to kill as much echo reverb as possible. We want the room to sound completely dead with nothing else going on than your voice. Which is why in some studios you might see foam or egg curtains on the wall. That's what that's doing. And that's one of the reasons that my walls are carpeted. Echoes and reverbs are effects we add in the mix, never in the recording process. You can plug your microphone directly into your audio interface, the 4i4 for example that we saw earlier, via an XLR cable. This is a standard cable for all microphones. If you have a bigger budget, you may want to invest in a vocal processor. What these do is refine your vocal sound prior to recording. I have a Tascam TA1VP, which will set you back about £450, which is $540 USD. It has a whole bunch of features around auto-tuning and harmonizing that I've never used, but you may find a use for these. But otherwise you're going in and just mucking in, or it's like EQing, changing the different tones in your voice. So kind of getting it as perfect as possible before it goes into the microphone and into your recording. This processor has an output at the back, and that basically goes around into your audio interface. I always have that just plugged straight into channel 1, so I know my vocals are always in channel 1. Now I spoke earlier about phantom power. Remember I said there's this little switch on the front of your audio interface. It just says 48V and you press it and it lights up. So phantom power is basically just a way of upping the power to your studio condenser microphone that will allow it to operate. Dynamic microphones such as the Shure SM58 do not need that. So if you've got your condenser microphone plugged in and you can't hear it when you're trying to set up your recording, it's probably because you've not got the 48 volt power switched on. So just give that button a press and that should eliminate that problem. This extra power is supplied via the XLR cable to the microphone, and that power boost negates the need for any separate power supply going to your microphone. Headphones are an absolute must-have for recording. When recording anything through a microphone, there must be zero sound in the room. If you have studio monitors, they must be turned off when recording. The only way you should be monitoring the song as you lay down tracks is via your headphones. I use a set of Beyerdynamic DT150s. These are the industry standard headphones and cost around £190, $230, but they are so worth the money because they will last forever. I've had these ones for about 20 years or so, and the only maintenance that they ever require is every 5 years perhaps. You need to replace these kind of foam pads because they will degrade over time, but they're very cheap and very easy to replace. There are obviously cheaper headphones out there that will do the job just as fine. When recording vocals with headphones on, a little trick I like to do is to move the right can, they're called cans, slightly off my ear, so I can still hear the playback of my vocal mix, but also my actual voice in the room. As these are over ear cans, they do mask the sound in the room, and I find that this helps just to get your pitch correction correct. Okay, so what is MIDI? Well, MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface and is basically a way of converting what you play on an instrument into a digital pattern that can be manipulated later in your software. So rather than it being an audio recording coming in as a waveform, which you then have very little control over, it is a series of digital signals that I can grab and change the tone, the length, the intensity, and the sound of. So I can play something on a MIDI piano and set it to a trumpet in my audio workstation software. This opens up a whole universe of possibilities, restricted only by what the audio software offers and your imagination. Setting up is easy, attaching MIDI cables to the back of your instrument, in this case the digital piano, to your audio interface. And again, just make sure you've got the MIDI out and MIDI in cables the right way around. Now, in order to listen back to your recordings, you're going to need speakers. Now, you can hook them up directly to your audio interface, but if you're going to go for high-end speakers, you'll likely need an amplifier. I use this rack-mounted Samson Servo 190, which is now discontinued, but it does produce a little hum that annoys me, so watch out for that. It doesn't annoy me enough to warrant buying another model, and the microphone doesn't seem to pick it up, but it is definitely something I'm going to replace over time. To this, I have attached a pair of Tannoy Reveals studio monitors, which are excellent. Again, your budget will dictate the quality here, so the price can vary, but they will start around the £200, 240 USD mark. But you can go cheaper if you want to hook up directly to your audio interface without an amplifier, using speakers that have built-in amplifiers, commonly referred to as active speakers. Before I move on to guitars and our digital audio workstation software, I want to talk a little bit about aesthetics. Getting your feng shui or your mood right in your room can really help the creative flow, really create a beautiful environment in which to create music. My studio, as you know, is the red room, so everything in here is pretty much red. I've got red carpets on the walls, I've got a red Coca-Cola fridge behind me, not sponsored by. I've got red lights. Heck, I even play a Brian May red special guitar. But also on my walls are the acts from which I draw inspiration. On my right here are a very youthful looking Queen. Brian May is always looking at me with that, "Is that really the best you can do?" look on his face. And Freddie is there reminding me not to take things too seriously. Down here we have some Soundgarden and the watchful eyes of Lord Ganesh. Chris Cornell was my absolute hero. Up here are some of my jazz heroes, John Coltrane and Dave Brubeck. And over here on the left, right behind my vocal space, are the Fab Four, reminding me that anything is possible. Below that is some Alice in Chains, one of my all-time favourite bands. And up here, of course, we see Freddie again. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm a huge Queen fan. I think it's so important to have your inspiration around you, your heroes, reminding you that anything can be achieved when you set your mind to it. So the last kit I want to discuss before we move on to software is guitar amps and amp emulators. For the bedroom guitarist, a Marshall or a Mesa Boogie stack is simply not going to fly. They take up tons of space and your neighbours are going to hate you. If you have a garage or studio setup, great, analog equipment will still work, but these days there's not so much need to mic up your amplifier and plug it all directly into your audio interface. I have amps, but they're rarely switched on, as I achieve the same results via DI, that is direct input amp emulators. Now the concept of DI amp emulators dates back to the 1970s. One example is when Boston guitarist Tom Schultz developed the Rockman headphone amp, a small pocket-sized device that clips onto your belt. With this he started a revolution in DI amplification that developed through many iterations, most notably the range of Line 6 pod emulators, and more recently the Kemper Profilers. I have a rack-mounted Kemper Profiler, and got the t-shirt to prove it. And that set me back around £2,000, USD $2,400, but it is basically the best and most outstanding piece of equipment I have ever purchased. We'll look at it in more detail, but basically you plug your guitar in as you would a guitar amp, and the whole thing is hooked up to your audio interface. You then choose which amp profile you want to use, so I might want to use an Orange amp or a Marshall amp or a Mesa Boogie. It's all profiled in there and you can just go find that amp, and then you can add effects, delays, reverb, all of those kind of effects are built in, and you can set up and save that configuration, and then it's all very easily accessed via the Kemper's remote pedal board. Now this is top of the range stuff, but there are cheaper options out there that will give you great results. You could use the software versions that come with your DAW software, so such as Pro Tools and Logic Pro have these filters that bring up guitar amps on your screen in a little modal window, and you can go and muck about with the settings in there. Doesn't sound as good as a Kemper. If you're looking in the hardware route, there are other product providers such as Line 6, MXR, Boss, Behringer, they all do great stuff. It really depends on how much you want to spend. I used to have rack-mounted Line 6 products and they worked just as well, one for guitar and one for bass, but really nothing beats Kemper in my opinion. Finally, we need to talk about software. The recording and production software is referred to as a DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation. This does the job of a recording studio, allowing you to record and mix your tracks before outputting a fully mastered MP3 or high quality audio file. There are many to choose from, such as Ableton, Pro Tools, Cubase or FL Studio, but as an Apple user, it's always going to be Logic Pro for me. They're all very similar, so what I will show you in Logic Pro should be very easy to replicate in whatever software you opt for. Now, Logic Pro will set you back about £200, that's about 240 US dollars, but I have to say that is incredible value for money. I've never had to pay for an upgrade, it is a one-off payment, and if you intend to try and generate any income from your music, it is an absolute no-brainer purchase. If, however, you are on a tight budget and don't want to quite go as far as Logic Pro yet, GarageBand is still a very good entry-level option for you. We'll be looking at Logic Pro in more detail as I go through the songwriting and production process, but I strongly suggest going out there, checking out some reviews of the software before making your final decision. It may be that you're a PC user and Logic Pro just isn't for you. So yeah, go check out some reviews. For all the equipment we've looked at today, I won't ever be doing full feature reviews. I'll only ever be touching on the parts that I use to create my music. If you want to know more about the products and their features, there are more than enough tutorials out there. I'll just be focusing on what I see as a great workflow to create awesome tunes. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope that this walkthrough of equipment has been educational and valuable for you. Please also check out my music via the links on my dashboard so you can get an understanding of exactly what is achievable with the process I'm going to be showing you. Have an awesome day, my friends.